The clock in Chuck Norris's cozy Texas home ticked softly, marking the quiet hours of the night. It was just past 3 in the morning, a time when most people were deep in sleep, dreaming away their worries. But not Chuck. He had always been an early riser and a late sleeper, someone who valued every moment of the day. Tonight, however, he wasn't working out or practicing his martial arts moves. Instead, he sat by the fireplace, wrapped in a warm blanket, sipping chamomile tea. The room was dimly lit, with only the flickering flames casting shadows on the walls. It was peaceful, almost perfect. But then, the silence was broken. A sharp ring echoed through the house, startling Chuck for a brief second. His brow furrowed as he glanced at the old-fashioned phone resting on the side table. Who could be calling at this hour? Most of his friends knew better than to disturb him during these rare moments of calm. Still, something told him this call wasn't ordinary. Setting his teacup down carefully, he reached for the receiver and answered with his usual calm tone. "Hello?" On the other end of the line was a voice that Chuck recognized immediately. It belonged to Steven Seagal, another famous figure in the world of action movies and martial arts. But there was something different about Steven tonight. His voice sounded shaky, strained, like he was holding back tears. This wasn't the confident, commanding man Chuck had known for years. Something was very wrong. "Chuck," Steven began, his words coming out unevenly. I didn't know who else to call. I'm sorry for waking you up, but I don't know what to do." Chuck straightened up slightly, his instincts kicking in. Whatever this was, it wasn't trivial. "Take your time, Steven," he said gently, his voice steady and reassuring. "Tell me what's going on." There was a pause on the other end, as if Steven needed a moment to gather himself. When he finally spoke again, his voice cracked, under the weight of emotion. "It's Ryan, my brother. He's talking about ending it all." The words hit Chuck like a punch to the gut, though his expression remained calm. Ryan Seagal, Steven's younger brother, wasn't someone Chuck knew personally, but he'd heard stories about him over the years. From what Steven had shared, Ryan was a good man, hard-working and kind-hearted, but life hadn't been easy for him lately. Steven went on to explain how Ryan had fallen into a dark place after losing his job and breaking up with his girlfriend, Lisa. These setbacks had taken a toll on him, leaving him feeling lost and hopeless. "He hasn't been answering my calls much lately," Steven continued, his voice trembling even more now. "But tonight he sent me a text. Just 2 words. Goodbye, Steven. That's it. No explanation. Nothing. I tried calling him right away, but he didn't pick up. And now I can't stop thinking about what might happen if I don't do something." Chuck listened intently, his mind already racing with possibilities. He understood the gravity of the situation. People often joked about how tough and unbreakable celebrities like Steven and Chuck were, but behind the scenes, they faced real struggles too. And sometimes, those struggles spilled over into the lives of the people they loved. For Steven, this wasn't just about fame or fortune, it was about family. His brother was in trouble and he felt powerless to help. "Okay, listen to me," Chuck said firmly, snapping Steven out of his spiral of panic. "You did the right thing by calling me. We're going to handle this step by step. First, you need to contact the authorities immediately. Call 911 and let them know what's happening. They'll send someone to check on Ryan." Steven hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should involve the police. What if Ryan got angry? What if it made things worse? Sensing his hesitation, Chuck added, "I know it's scary, but this isn't the time to second-guess yourself. Your brother needs help, and we can't wait around hoping he'll change his mind. Trust me, you're doing the right thing." Reluctantly, Steven agreed. "All right," he said, his voice still shaky but a little steadier than before. "I'll call them right now. But what else can I do? I feel so helpless." Chuck thought for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "After you call 911, try reaching out to Ryan directly. Don't argue with him or tell him what to do, just remind him that you're here for him no matter what." Sometimes hearing that someone cares is enough to make a difference. Steven nodded even though Chuck couldn't see him. "Okay, I'll try that." There was another pause, followed by a heavy sigh. "Thanks, Chuck. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'd manage," Chuck replied with a small smile, though it carried a hint of seriousness. "You're stronger than you think, Stephen, but you don't have to face this alone. Let's get through this together." As the call ended, Chuck hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair, staring into the fire. He knew the next few hours would be critical, not just for Ryan, but for Stephen too. Watching a loved one struggle with such pain was devastating, and Chuck couldn't imagine how Stephen must have been feeling. Still, there was something else nagging at him, something deeper. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about making sure Ryan stayed safe tonight. There was more to it, a chance to show Ryan that he mattered, that his life had value. With that thought in mind, Chuck grabbed a pen and a piece of paper. He wanted to write something, a message that might reach Ryan in a way words spoken over the phone never could. As he started writing, his thoughts turned inward, reflecting on his own experiences with hardship and doubt. Sure, he was known as a legend, a symbol of strength and resilience, but Chuck knew better than anyone that true strength wasn't about being fearless. It was about facing fear head-on and refusing to give up, no matter how hard things got. For the next hour, Chuck poured his heart into the letter. He wrote about the times he'd felt defeated as a young man, struggling to find his place in the world. He talked about the lessons he'd learned from failure and how those lessons had shaped him into the person he was today. Above all, he emphasized one simple truth: everyone has battles, and asking for help doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. When he finished, Chuck folded the letter neatly and placed it aside, knowing exactly where it needed to go once the immediate crisis passed. For now, though, he focused on the present, praying silently that the authorities would find Ryan in time and that Stephen's efforts to connect with his brother wouldn't go unanswered. Outside, the night stretched on, silent and still. Inside, Chuck sat by the fire waiting for news. He didn't know yet how this story would unfold, but he was determined to play his part in seeing it through. After all, saving a life wasn't just about physical strength. It was about compassion, understanding, and the willingness to stand by someone when they needed it most. After hanging up the phone with Chuck Norris, Stephen Seagal felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him: fear, guilt, and a glimmer of hope. He knew he couldn't waste another second. Grabbing his phone, he dialed 911 with trembling fingers. The operator answered quickly, her calm voice cutting through the chaos in Stephen's mind. 911, what's your emergency? She asked. Stephen took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. My name is Stephen Seagal, he began, his voice shaking slightly. I'm calling about my brother, Ryan Seagal. He lives alone in Los Angeles, and I think he might be in danger. He sent me a text saying goodbye, and he hasn't answered any of my calls since. The operator listened carefully, asking for details like Ryan's address and any recent behaviors that might indicate trouble. Stephen provided everything he could, explaining how Ryan had been struggling emotionally after losing his job and ending a relationship. By the time the call ended, Stephen felt a small sense of relief knowing that professionals were on their way to check on Ryan. But it wasn't enough. He still needed to reach out to Ryan personally, just as Chuck had suggested. Pacing back and forth in his living room, Stephen tried calling Ryan again. Each unanswered ring made his heart sink further. Finally, he decided to send a text instead. His thumbs hovered over the screen as he thought about what to say. How could he put into words everything he was feeling? Taking a deep breath, he typed out a message. Ryan, it's Stephen. I got your text and I'm really worried about you. Please know that no matter what you're going through, I'm here for you. You're not alone, bro. Call me when you can. I love you. As soon as he hit send, Stephen felt a pang of uncertainty. Would Ryan even read it? Would it make a difference? There was no way to know, so all he could do was wait. He sat down on the couch, staring at his phone, willing it to light up with a response. Minutes ticked by, each one feeling longer than the last. While Stephen waited anxiously, Chuck Norris was busy putting his own plan into action. After writing the heartfelt letter earlier, he realized there was more he could do to help. He picked up his phone and called an old friend named Jake Carter, a martial arts instructor who ran a community center in Los Angeles. Jake was known for his kindness and dedication to helping others, especially those facing tough times. "Jake, it's Chuck," he said when Jake answered. "I need your help with something important." Jake's tone immediately shifted from casual to serious. "Of course, Chuck. What's going on?" Chuck explained the situation with Ryan, emphasizing how crucial it was to offer support once the immediate danger passed. "I've written him a letter, but I think having someone like you, who knows what it's like to struggle and overcome, could make a big difference. If Ryan agrees, maybe you could meet with him, show him he's not alone." Jake didn't hesitate. "You don't even have to ask, Chuck. I'll do whatever I can to help. Just let me know when and where." "Thanks, Jake," Chuck replied, grateful for his friend's willingness to step in. "I'll keep you updated." With that, conversation settled. Chuck turned his attention back to the letter. He reread it several times, making sure every word carried the weight of sincerity and compassion. When he was satisfied, he sealed it in an envelope and wrote Ryan's name across the front. It would be delivered later once Ryan was safe and ready to receive it. Back in Los Angeles, police officers arrived at Ryan's apartment building within minutes of receiving Stephen's call. They knocked loudly on the door, announcing themselves as law enforcement. At first there was no response. Growing concerned, they used a spare key provided by the building manager to enter the unit. Inside, they found Ryan sitting on the edge of his bed, staring blankly at the floor. His face was pale and his eyes were red from crying. Though visibly shaken, he appeared physically unharmed. "Mr. Seagal?" one officer asked gently. "We're here because your brother called us. He's very worried about you." Ryan looked up, confusion and shame washing over him. "My brother?" he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," the officer confirmed. "He cares about you deeply and wants to make sure you're okay. Can we talk for a moment?" Ryan hesitated before nodding slowly. As the officers spoke with him, they assessed his condition and determined that he needed medical attention. An ambulance was called, and paramedics arrived shortly afterward to transport Ryan to a nearby hospital for evaluation. Once there, doctors confirmed that Ryan was suffering from severe depression and anxiety. They recommended admitting him for observation and treatment to ensure his safety. Meanwhile, Stephen received a call from the police informing him of Ryan's condition. Relief washed over him, but it was mixed with lingering worry. Knowing Ryan was alive and receiving care eased some of the tension in his chest, but he couldn't shake the image of his brother sitting alone in that apartment, feeling like the world had abandoned him. Later that morning, Stephen visited the hospital to see Ryan. Walking into the sterile white room, he saw his younger brother lying in bed, looking smaller and more fragile than ever. Ryan glanced up when Stephen entered, his expression unreadable. "Hey, bro," Stephen said softly, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "How are you holding up?" Ryan shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "I don't know," he admitted quietly. "I guess I messed up." Stephen shook his head firmly. "No, you didn't mess up, Ryan. You're human, and humans get overwhelmed sometimes. What matters now is that you're here, and we're going to figure this out together." Ryan didn't respond right away, but the faintest hint of a smile tugged at the corners of his lips. For the first time in weeks, he felt a tiny spark of hope. Not because of anything specific Stephen had said, but because of the simple fact that someone cared enough to show up. Unbeknownst to Ryan, there was another gesture waiting for him. While Stephen stayed by his side, a nurse entered the room carrying a small envelope. She placed it gently on the bedside table next to Ryan's water pitcher. "This came for you," she said kindly before leaving. Ryan stared at the envelope, puzzled. Written neatly on the front were two words: "To Ryan." Curiosity eventually got the better of him, and he reached for it. Opening the letter, he recognized Chuck Norris's signature handwriting instantly. As he began reading, tears welled up in his eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of gratitude and understanding. In that moment, Ryan realized he wasn't fighting this battle alone. There were people who believed in him, even when he struggled to believe in himself. And somewhere far away, Chuck Norris smiled knowingly, confident that the letter and the chain of events it set in motion had done its job. The days following Ryan's hospital admission were a blur of doctors, nurses, and therapy sessions. At first, Ryan felt overwhelmed by the constant attention. He wasn't used to being the center of focus, especially not in such a vulnerable state. But as the hours turned into days, he began to settle into a routine. The hospital staff was kind and patient, always asking how they could make him more comfortable. His brother Stephen visited every day, bringing books, snacks, and updates from home. Sometimes Lisa, his ex-girlfriend, would stop by too, though their conversations were brief and awkward at first. Still, her presence reminded Ryan that she cared, even if things between them hadn't worked out. But it was the letter from Chuck Norris that truly stayed with Ryan. After reading it for the first time, he couldn't stop thinking about its words. Chuck had written about his own struggles, sharing stories of moments when he'd felt defeated or unsure of himself. It surprised Ryan to learn that someone like Chuck, who seemed so strong and unshakable, had faced doubts just like anyone else. What resonated most, though, was Chuck's message of resilience. True strength, Chuck had written, isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up, no matter how many times life knocks you down. Ryan read the letter over and over, each time finding new meaning in its words. It became a source of comfort during the long nights when sleep eluded him. He kept it tucked under his pillow, close enough to reach whenever he needed a reminder that he wasn't alone. One morning, a few days after being admitted, Ryan met with Dr. Emily Parker, a psychiatrist assigned to his case. She had a warm smile and a calm demeanor that put Ryan at ease. Sitting across from her in a quiet room, Ryan talked openly about his feelings for the first time in months. He told her about losing his job, breaking up with Lisa, and the overwhelming sense of failure that followed. "You know, Ryan," Dr. Parker said gently, "it's okay to feel lost sometimes. Life has a way of throwing challenges at us that we don't always know how to handle. But what's important is recognizing when you need help and reaching out for it." Ryan nodded, though he still felt uncertain. "I guess I didn't realize how much I was bottling up until now," he admitted. "I thought I could deal with everything on my own, but it just got too heavy." Dr. Parker smiled encouragingly. "That's a common belief, especially among men. We're often taught to be tough and self-reliant, but asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. You've already taken the first step by being here." Her words stuck with Ryan long after their session ended. Later that evening, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he thought about what she'd said. Maybe he didn't have to carry everything on his own. Maybe it was okay to lean on others for support. The next day brought another visitor, Jake Carter, the martial arts instructor Chuck Norris had contacted. Jake introduced himself with a firm handshake and a friendly grin. "Hey, Ryan," he said warmly. "Chuck told me about what you've been going through, and I wanted to come by to see how you're doing." Ryan blinked in surprise. "You know Chuck Norris?" Jake chuckled. "Yeah, we go way back. He asked me to check in on you because he thought I might understand where you're coming from. I've been through some tough times myself, and martial arts helped me get through them. Thought maybe it could do the same for you." Ryan hesitated. He'd never practiced martial arts before and wasn't sure if it was something he'd enjoy. But there was something genuine about Jake's offer, something that made Ryan curious. "I don't know anything about martial arts," he admitted. "Do you think it would really help?" Jake shrugged casually. "Honestly, it's not just about punches and kicks. Martial arts teach discipline, focus, and perseverance. They remind you that progress takes time, and setbacks are part of the journey. Plus, it's a great way to blow off steam." Ryan considered this for a moment before nodding slowly. "All right, if you think it'll help, I'm willing to give it a try." Over the next week, Jake visited Ryan regularly, teaching him basic techniques and sharing stories about his own struggles. Their conversations weren't limited to martial arts. They often drifted into deeper topics, like dealing with failure and finding purpose. Jake's openness encouraged Ryan to open up further, and for the first time in months, Ryan felt like he was beginning to heal. As Ryan continued working with Jake, he also started attending group therapy sessions at the hospital. These sessions brought together people from all walks of life who were battling similar demons. Hearing their stories reminded Ryan that he wasn't alone. One participant, a woman named Claire, shared how she'd overcome addiction and rebuilt her life one small step at a time. Her courage inspired Ryan to keep pushing forward, even on days when it felt impossible. Meanwhile, Stephen remained a constant presence in Ryan's life. He attended therapy sessions with Ryan whenever possible, offering encouragement and support. Their relationship grew stronger as they worked through the pain and misunderstandings that had built up over the years. Stephen even joked about signing up for martial arts classes alongside Ryan, though he quickly admitted he'd probably embarrass himself more than anything. Lisa also played a role in Ryan's recovery, albeit a quieter one. Though they weren't rekindling their romance, they developed a friendship based on mutual respect and understanding. Lisa encouraged Ryan to take things slow, reminding him that healing was a process that couldn't be rushed. "You've got this," she told him during one of her visits. "Just keep moving forward one step at a time." By the time Ryan was discharged from the hospital 2 weeks later, he felt like a different person. The weight that had crushed him before was still present, but it no longer felt unbearable. He had tools to cope, a combination of therapy, martial arts, and the unwavering support of those around him. Most importantly, he had hope. For the first time in a long time, Ryan believed that things could get better. On his last day at the hospital, Ryan received another surprise visit from Chuck. Norris himself. Dressed casually in jeans and a plaid shirt, Chuck walked into Ryan's room carrying a small gift bag. "Hey, Ryan," he said with a warm smile. "How's it going?" Ryan stared in disbelief, unsure if he was dreaming. "Mr. Norris, what are you doing here?" Chuck laughed softly. "Call me Chuck, and I'm here because I wanted to see how you're doing for myself. You've been through a lot, and I wanted to let you know that I'm proud of you." Ryan felt tears welling up in his eyes again. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice choked with emotion. "Your letter, it meant so much to me." Chuck nodded knowingly. "Sometimes, we all need a reminder that we're stronger than we think. And trust me, you're stronger than you realize." He handed Ryan the gift bag, which contained a signed photo of himself along with a handwritten note. The inscription read, "Strength isn't measured by how many punches you throw. It's measured by how many times you rise after falling." Ryan held the photo tightly, feeling a surge of gratitude and determination. As Chuck prepared to leave, he placed a reassuring hand on Ryan's shoulder. "Keep fighting, Ryan, you've got this." With those final words, Chuck turned and walked away, leaving Ryan standing there with renewed resolve. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it. With his brother, friends, and newfound mentors by his side, Ryan was determined to build a brighter future, one step at a time. Ryan's transition from the hospital back to everyday life wasn't easy, but it was better than he had imagined. Armed with the tools he'd learned during his recovery, therapy, martial arts, and the support of those around him, he began rebuilding his life piece by piece. At first, everything felt fragile, like a house of cards that might collapse at any moment. But Ryan reminded himself of the words Chuck Norris had written in his letter. "True strength is about getting back up." Slowly, day by day, he found his footing. One of the biggest changes in Ryan's routine came when Jake Carter invited him to join his martial arts classes at the community center. The idea of stepping into a dojo filled Ryan with both excitement and nerves. He didn't know if he'd be any good or if he'd embarrass himself in front of others. But Jake assured him that everyone started somewhere, and perfection wasn't the goal. "Just show up," Jake told him. "The rest will come naturally." On his first day, Ryan walked into the dojo feeling out of place. The room buzzed with energy as students stretched and practiced their techniques under Jake's watchful eye. When Ryan introduced himself, some of the students greeted him warmly, while others barely looked up from their warm-ups. Ryan took a deep breath and joined them on the mat, mimicking the stretches as best he could. Jake noticed Ryan's hesitation right away. "Hey, don't worry about looking silly," Jake said with a grin. "Half these guys still trip over their own feet after months of practice. You're here to learn, not to impress anyone." That reassurance helped Ryan relax a little. Over time, he grew more comfortable in the class. He discovered that martial arts weren't just about physical strength. They were about focus, patience, and perseverance. Every kick, punch, and block required concentration, forcing Ryan to clear his mind of distractions. For the first time in months, he felt truly present in the moment instead of dwelling on past failures or worrying about the future. Jake became more than just an instructor to Ryan. He became a mentor and a friend. After each class, they would sit together in the corner of the dojo, drinking water and talking about life. Jake shared stories of his own struggles, including a period when he'd lost his job and nearly given up on teaching altogether. "What got me through was remembering why I started," Jake explained one evening. "I loved helping people discover their potential. That purpose kept me going, even when things got tough." Ryan listened intently, realizing how much he had in common with Jake. Like Jake, he needed to find a sense of purpose again. Martial arts gave him something to look forward to, but he knew he couldn't rely on it forever. He needed to rebuild other parts of his life too. With Steven's encouragement, Ryan decided to take small steps toward finding new work. His old job as a graphic designer had been fulfilling, but losing it had left him questioning whether he even wanted to return to that field. Instead of jumping straight back into design, he started volunteering at a local nonprofit organization that helped young people develop creative skills. It was unpaid work, but it allowed Ryan to use his talents while giving back to the community. At first, Ryan worried that he wouldn't fit in or that his contributions wouldn't matter, but the staff at the nonprofit welcomed him warmly, praising his designs for posters and flyers promoting their programs. One of the program coordinators, a cheerful woman named Maria, often stopped by to thank him for his efforts. "You're making such a difference here," she told him one afternoon. "These kids are inspired by your work." Hearing those words made Ryan feel proud, not because someone praised him, but because he finally felt useful again. Volunteering reminded him that his skills mattered and that he could make a positive impact, even in small ways. Outside of work and martial arts, Ryan continued attending therapy sessions. Dr. Parker encouraged him to explore his emotions without judgment, helping him untangle the web of guilt and self-doubt that had trapped him for so long. Through therapy, Ryan began understanding the root causes of his depression, the pressure he put on himself to succeed, the fear of disappointing others, and the loneliness he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. One breakthrough moment came during a session when Dr. Parker asked Ryan what success meant to him. Ryan paused, thinking carefully before answering. "I guess success used to mean having everything figured out," he admitted. "A great job, a happy relationship, money in the bank. But now I think it's more about being okay with who I am even when things aren't perfect." Dr. Parker smiled approvingly. "That's a powerful shift in perspective, Ryan. Success doesn't have to look like everyone else's version of it. It can be uniquely yours." As Ryan worked on healing, his relationships with the people closest to him also improved. Stephen remained a constant source of support, checking in regularly and celebrating Ryan's progress no matter how small. They spent weekends watching movies, cooking meals together, or simply hanging out at home. Their bond grew stronger than ever, built on honesty and mutual respect. Lisa, too, played a supportive role in Ryan's life. Though their romantic relationship had ended, their friendship flourished. Lisa encouraged Ryan to pursue his passions and reminded him to take care of himself. She even attended one of his martial arts classes, cheering him on from the sidelines. Seeing her there made Ryan smile. It was proof that their connection hadn't disappeared entirely, even if it had changed. Even Chuck Norris stayed involved in Ryan's journey, though mostly through letters and occasional phone calls. Each message carried words of encouragement and wisdom, reinforcing Ryan's belief that he was capable of overcoming anything. One letter in particular stood out to Ryan. In it, Chuck wrote, Life is full of challenges, but every challenge is an opportunity to grow stronger. Keep moving forward, Ryan. You've already proven you're tougher than you think. Those words stayed with Ryan, echoing in his mind whenever doubt crept in. He taped the letter to the wall above his desk, where he could see it every day. It served as a reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight, that there were people rooting for him, believing in him, and cheering him on. By the end of 6 months, Ryan's life looked vastly different from the dark days when he'd sent that heartbreaking text to Stephen. He still faced challenges, of course. There were bad days when sadness threatened to pull him back down, but he handled them differently now. Instead of bottling up his emotions, he reached out to friends or journaled about his feelings. Instead of giving up when things got hard, he reminded himself of how far he'd come. Martial arts continued to play a central role in Ryan's life. He progressed steadily, earning his yellow belt after months of dedication. On the day of his promotion ceremony, Stephen, Lisa, and Jake were all there to cheer him on. As Ryan stood proudly in front of the group holding his certificate, he felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything he'd experienced before. This achievement wasn't just about mastering techniques. It was about proving to himself that he could persevere no matter the odds. After the ceremony, Jake pulled Ryan aside for a private chat. "You know, Ryan," Jake said thoughtfully, "you've inspired a lot of people here, including me. Watching you overcome everything you've been through reminds us all that we're capable of more than we think." Ryan blushed at the compliment, unsure how to respond. "Thanks, Jake," he said finally. "But I couldn't have done it without you, or without Chuck, Stephen, Lisa, and everyone else who believed in me." Jake nodded knowingly. "It takes a village sometimes. Just remember, you've earned every bit of this. Don't forget to celebrate your victories, big or small." That night, as Ryan lay in bed reflecting on the day's events, he realized how much his perspective had shifted. Where once he'd seen failure and despair, he now saw opportunities for growth. Where once he'd felt isolated, he now felt surrounded by love and support. Life wasn't perfect, and it probably never would be. But for the first time in a long time, Ryan felt hopeful about the future. He closed his eyes, letting the calmness of the moment wash over him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Ryan knew he was ready to face them, one step at a time. A year had passed since Ryan Seagal's darkest night, the one that almost ended everything. Now, as he stood before a crowd of strangers and friends at a community center in Los Angeles, he felt a mix of nerves and pride. The event was part of a mental health awareness campaign aimed at breaking the stigma around depression and anxiety. Ryan hadn't planned on speaking publicly about his struggles, but when Maria, the coordinator from the nonprofit where he volunteered, asked him to share his story, he couldn't say no. It was time, he realized, to give back in a new way. The room buzzed with quiet chatter as people settled into their seats. Ryan glanced around, spotting familiar faces in the audience. Stephen, Lisa, Jake, and even Chuck Norris, who had flown in to show his support. Their presence gave Ryan strength, reminding him that he wasn't alone. Taking a deep breath, he stepped up to the microphone and began to speak. "Hi, everyone," he started, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "My name is Ryan, and I'm here today because I almost didn't make it this far." The room fell silent, every eye fixed on him. Ryan continued, sharing pieces of his journey, the job loss, the breakup, the overwhelming sense of failure that led him to send that fateful text message to his brother. He talked about hitting rock bottom and how scared he'd been to ask for help. But then he shifted to the turning point, the moment when Stephen called Chuck Norris in desperation. "People think of guys like Stephen and Chuck as invincible," Ryan said with a small smile. "But what I've learned is that even the strongest among us need help sometimes. What saved me wasn't just my family or my friends, it was the reminder that I mattered, that my life had value, even when I couldn't see it myself." As Ryan spoke, he noticed nods of understanding throughout the audience. Some people wiped away tears, while others leaned forward, hanging on his every word. He told them about the letter Chuck wrote, the therapy sessions that helped him untangle his emotions, and the martial arts classes that taught him discipline and resilience. He shared how volunteering at the nonprofit gave him purpose again, and how leaning on his loved ones kept him grounded during tough times. "When I hit my lowest point," Ryan admitted, "I thought I was completely alone. But the truth is, none of us are ever truly alone. There's always someone willing to listen, to reach out, to remind you that you're worth fighting for. All you have to do is let them in." By the time Ryan finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering as if they'd witnessed something extraordinary. And in many ways, they had. For Ryan, standing there under the spotlight, it felt surreal. Just a year ago, he'd been lying in a hospital bed, unsure if he'd ever feel whole again. Now he was inspiring others to keep going, to hold on even when life felt unbearable. After the event, dozens of attendees approached Ryan to thank him. Many shared their own stories of struggle and survival, telling him how his words had resonated with them. One woman hugged him tightly, saying, "You gave me hope tonight. Thank you for being brave enough to share your story." Another man shook his hand firmly, adding, "I've been where you were. Hearing you talk gives me the courage to keep trying." Ryan accepted their gratitude humbly, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. This was why he'd agreed to speak, to remind others that they weren't alone. And in doing so, he realized he was healing himself too. Later that evening, Chuck Norris sought Ryan out. The legendary figure embraced him warmly, congratulating him on his progress and thanking him for inspiring so many people. "You've come such a long way, Ryan," Chuck said sincerely. "And you're proof that second chances are possible if we fight for them." Ryan smiled, holding back tears. "I couldn't have done it without you, or without Stephen, Lisa, Jake, and everyone else who stood by me. You all believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Chuck nodded knowingly. "That's the power of community, Ryan. We're stronger together than we are apart. Never forget that." Before leaving, Chuck handed Ryan a small token, a signed photo with an inscription written in bold letters. "Strength isn't measured by how many punches you throw. It's measured by how many times you rise after falling." Ryan held the picture close, feeling a surge of gratitude and determination. Those words would stay with him forever, a permanent reminder of how far he'd come. In the weeks following the event, Ryan continued building his new life. His volunteer work at the nonprofit evolved into a part-time position, allowing him to earn income while still pursuing his passion for helping others. He also advanced in his martial arts training, earning his green belt after months of hard work. Jake joked that Ryan might surpass him someday, though both knew it wasn't about competition, it was about growth. Stephen remained a pillar of support, often joining Ryan for workouts or movie nights. Their bond had grown stronger than ever, built on trust and mutual respect. Lisa, too, stayed in touch, cheering Ryan on from afar as she pursued her own goals. Though they weren't romantically involved anymore, their friendship was solid and meaningful. Most importantly, Ryan carried the lessons he'd learned into every aspect of his life. When challenges arose, and they inevitably did, he faced them with patience and perseverance. He reminded himself daily that setbacks were temporary, and that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness but of strength. He kept Chuck's letters close, rereading them whenever doubt crept in. Each word served as a lifeline, pulling him back toward hope when darkness threatened to take hold. One sunny afternoon, Ryan found himself sitting on a park bench, watching children play and couples stroll by. Life moved forward as it always did, and Ryan felt grateful to be part of it. He thought about the past year, all the pain, the growth, the love he'd experienced, and smiled softly. It hadn't been easy, and some days were still harder than others. But he was alive, and that meant everything. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ryan whispered a quiet promise to himself. "No matter what happens next," he said aloud, "I'll keep moving forward, one step at a time." And with that vow, Ryan stood up, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring.